You're watching Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Julia Kim, and these are the headlines on the continent. As Sudan's transitional government marks its first 100 days in office, rights groups intensify calls for accountability for war crimes committed in Darfur. The 18th of December marks International Migrants Day. Our correspondent takes a look at how one Vatican-led effort is helping African migrants in Italy. And Cuban music thrives in the bars of Ouagadougou. We'll tell you the story behind Burkina Faso's enduring passion for Cuba's tunes. But first, rights groups say there can be no real democratic political transition in Sudan unless justice is served for Darfur. Since a transitional government was installed in September, they've intensified calls for accountability. 300,000 people were killed and over 3 million were displaced in the conflict that broke out 17 years ago. In a report published today, rights groups slammed authorities for failing to hold members of the former regime, including ousted leader Omar al-Bashir, to account. He's currently wanted by the International Criminal Court for genocide, war crimes and crimes against humanity for his role in Darfur. Our correspondent Julia Steers has more.
The report was based on months of interviews with refugees living in Chad and with IDPs still in Sudan, and covered human rights violations that occurred during the conflict that killed over 300,000 and displaced over 3 million people. Researchers said it will be a long road to justice, but they did express some optimism in the transitional government currently in Khartoum.
The violation is still there, but it's not the huge number like before. Now there is some kind of peace process between the Darfurian movements and the Sudanese government, which is calming the situation a bit down.
The report stressed the need for accountability measures and assistance from organizations like the African Union, the EU, and the ICC.
The judiciary system or the justice system, they are not familiar with this kind of crimes. The legislation also, they are not very clear about identifying the crimes, and the procedure is not clear. So the proposal that we are thinking about, we can have a kind of, I'm not going for hybrid court, because hybrid court needs resources or whatever, but we need to get support from international community and from the African Union to support the justice system in Sudan to handle such kind of cases like this.
The stakes are high for the transitional government to get this right, and one of the key sticking points for many Sudanese is that they hold accountable members of the previous regime who are implicated in some of these crimes and who are still serving in the government.
Boko Haram militants have killed 14 civilians and wounded 5 others in Chad. Authorities say 13 others are still missing. The attackers targeted a fishermen's camp overnight Tuesday in the northeastern part of Lake Chad. Boko Haram began its insurgency in Nigeria a decade ago, but the violence has since spread to neighboring countries. It's launched regular raids in Chad, Niger and Cameroon, killing over 30,000 people and forcing some 2 million to flee their homes. Now, this Wednesday, December 18th, is the UN's International Migrants Day. This year, the event focuses on social cohesion as 272 million people try to settle in new destinations. Some of them, though, arrive without papers, meaning they're vulnerable to exploitation. In one small town in southern Italy, the Catholic Church is working with local authorities to help migrants in this situation. Our correspondent in Italy, Natalia Mendoza, tells us more.
Father Andrea Pupilla has been preaching in this parish church in southern Puglia since 2010, an area tainted by the exploitation of agricultural workers, mainly underpaid seasonal workers from the African continent. To counteract this problem, the local diocese has launched a new initiative to help migrants deal with the administrative procedures. For Father Andrea, this is an important part of the work of the Catholic Church.
The Gospel says, I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. It's simple and clear. Christ came to save the most fragile. He came for the poor, and we are the continuation of Christ's mission.
Once a week, the parish opens a help desk for migrants. Here, they can fill out a form which will give them an official fixed address at the church. A precious document which allows them to resolve their paperwork issues.
We cannot live in a country whereby without no document, without no your health, it's difficult for us to live like this in Europe.
Foreigners without a fixed address don't have access to the fundamental social services. They're working, but for different reasons, they don't have their papers in order.
With an official fixed address, migrants can obtain identity papers at the town hall and a residence certificate in Italy. The municipality sees it as a way to fight against undeclared workers.
With these identity papers, the farm workers can open a current account at the bank or the post office. And with that, they can be paid legally. It's also a good way to fight against the exploitation of immigrants by a mafia-run agricultural system.
For the moment, 3 parishes are working with the new protocol, but several others have already shown a willingness to take part. This is the first formal agreement between a town council and a diocese aimed at resolving the situation of agricultural workers, an initiative that has been strongly encouraged by Pope Francis.
Now, it was once dismissed as a weed, but now Ethiopia's prosopis trees are no longer considered a problem. The trees are used as charcoal and it's cheaper and more efficient than other types of fuel. Nicolas Jamal explains.
These are prosopis trees in southern Ethiopia. They are invasive and spiky. Farmers say they take over arable grazing land.
Where this tree grows, no other kind of tree can grow. That is the biggest problem. Its roots grow deep down into the ground and stretch far. That's why other trees can't grow.
But Somali refugees who live in the area have found that this tree does have virtues. It's much cheaper than other charcoal, it creates less smoke and it burns much longer. The refugees buy the wood from locals and transform it into charcoal in their camp.
Compared to regular charcoal, I have seen that this one is better. I start using it at 2 p.m. and it burns until 7 p.m. I can make tea and cook supper and warm food.
People here say it's a win-win situation. Farmers cut down trees that were preventing other plants from growing. These trees make charcoal that is more environmentally friendly than the usual kind. And thousands of refugees in the region are able to use it for cooking and heating.
Well, in Burkina Faso's capital, Ouagadougou, many bars book Cuban-style bands to play hits from the Buena Vista Social Club. The crowds are a little older, but even at 70 years young, they still know how to cut shapes on the dance floor. The popularity of Cuban music here dates back to the days of one-time President Thomas Sankara, a figure who was inspired by the revolutionary politics and music of his Cuban contemporaries.
In the bars of Burkina Faso, the music of Cuba's legendary Buena Vista Social Club is alive and thriving. Bob Seydoux and his band, the Faso Elites, play every weekend in one of the many bars and clubs of the capital Ouagadougou.
Us Burkinabe people like Cuban music. It takes us back to the old days, the time of our parents and our old president Thomas Sankara. May he rest in peace. He really liked Cuban tunes.
Thomas Sankara was nicknamed the African Che Guevara. He became a figurehead of the anti-imperialist and pan-Africanist movements. Sankara led Burkina Faso from 1983, before he was betrayed and assassinated in 1987. At this time, when many African nations were moving on from decades of colonial rule, Cuban music, with its links to the revolutionary politics of Fidel Castro, struck a chord. During Sankara's time in office, many people went to Cuba for education. In exchange, many Cubans travelled to Burkina Faso, political advisors, soldiers, doctors, and musicians too.
Cuba was a revolutionary country. At the time, there was a partnership between Burkina and Cuba. There were Cubans who came over bringing Cuban groups with them, like the Orquesta Aragon. They came here.
Thomas Sankara was a musician himself, playing in guitarist Roger Bihun's former group Missile Orchestra before his ascent to the presidency. Together, they made music halls and bars sway to their Afro-Cuban rhythms.
The tunes we played with him were written by Jonas Pedro and others. There were some Cuban pieces that we wrote here, mixing it in. We were good at Congolese music, Cuban, Mandinka and Guinean tunes.
The country recently observed the 32nd anniversary of Thomas Sankara's death and remembered this music-loving leader, a figure from a time when the worlds of music and politics were more intertwined than ever.
Now, between 1996 and 2003, several million people were killed in 2 wars in the DR Congo. But the years of bloodshed have received relatively little coverage outside the country. France 24's Nicolas Germain and Thomas Nicolon have revisited the country for an exclusive documentary on the First and Second Congo Wars. Their work will be broadcast on France 24 next month, but for a sneak preview, you can head to our website on france24.com. And that's it for this edition of Eye on Africa. There's more news coming up. Stay tuned to France 24.
Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith.
Reporting from across West Africa.
All the latest in politics, economics and the arts in Africa on France 24. Our journalist